rounding on patients at some of the worst times in their lives: stroke, brain tumors, brain hemorrhages. And I found it to be a real privilege to meet people at these really challenging times and walk them through that. And not only can you help them with the medicine that you know and the skill set that you have, but you can be there for them as a person and a human.
Hello, and welcome to the newest installment of the Brain Spine Group's Fellowship Series. I'd like to begin by introducing the person who we are interviewing today, Dr. Scott Zuckerman. Dr. Scott Zuckerman is a complex spine surgeon and co-director of Vanderbilt Sports Concussion Center and Vanderbilt Spine Outcomes Lab. Dr. Zuckerman spent his undergraduate years at Cornell University and then pursued his medical education at the Vanderbilt School of Medicine, where he also served as class president. Dr. Zuckerman continued his medical journey at Vanderbilt by completing his neurosurgical training, which included 2 enfolded rotations, one being in spinal oncology at MD Anderson and the other focused on peripheral nerve surgery at Mayo Clinic, Rochester. Additionally, he earned an MPH in epidemiology from the T.H. Chan School of Public Health at Harvard during his residency. Upon completing his residency, Dr. Zuckerman served as the Cornell University Global Neurosurgery Fellow in Tanzania and helped to implement a spine trauma protocol there. Following this experience, he concluded his clinical training by undertaking the Comprehensive Adult Spinal Deformity Fellowship at Columbia University Medical Center in New York under the guidance of Dr. Lawrence Linke and Dr. Ran Rue. In addition to all of this, Dr. Zuckerman serves our country as a member of the U.S. Navy Reserves and received the 2020 Alfred Award for Military Distinction from Officer Training Command in Newport, Rhode Island. And during our interview, we discussed many topics, and there were some names that came up repeatedly, and so I believe it'd be best practice if I go ahead and give you a bit of background so that when you hear these names during this interview, you understand the context. So let me go ahead and do that. Dr. Clint Devon was an orthopedic spine surgeon at Vanderbilt who was a pioneer in the development of the spine outcomes database at Vanderbilt, and then through the AAOS American Spine Registry. He authored more than 160 peer-reviewed publications and was a resident favorite. Dr. Gary Solomon is a former professor at Vanderbilt and current senior medical advisor to the NFL. He helped to grow the Sports Concussion Center at Vanderbilt and took part in mentoring many residents. Dr. Reed Thompson is the current department chairman of neurosurgery at Vanderbilt, a role he has held since 2010. He is a well-known and well-respected neurosurgical oncologist. Dr. Alan Sills is the current chief medical officer of the NFL. He was professor of neurosurgery at Vanderbilt, focusing his practice on neurosurgical oncology prior to his appointment. Dr. Richard Minger is the vice chairman of neurosurgery at the University of South Alabama, a mentor of mine, and a colleague of Dr. Zuckerman's. Dr. Zuckerman and Dr. Minger both completed the same prestigious spinal surgery fellowship at Columbia. Dr. Lawrence Linke is a world-renowned and leader in complex spine surgery. He is currently the chief of spinal deformity in the Department of Orthopedic Surgery at New York Presbyterian Columbia University Irvine Medical Center and co-directs the prestigious Advanced Pediatric Spinal Deformity Orthopedic Fellowship. Enjoy the interview. All right. There are so many questions and topics I'd love to discuss with you, but due to time constraints and your diversity of interests and experiences, there is no way we'll be able to discuss everything. Therefore, I like to center the conversation around your role as a spine surgeon. However, before that, in broad strokes, can you elaborate on your background and how some of your many interests evolved, starting from your high school years up to the present?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on, Gary. I really appreciate it. I think I've always kind of been interested in medicine and went to college being pre-med, but open to a lot of other ideas and fields. But just medicine, even though the pre-med classes were a little mundane and didn't really at least me, didn't get me that interested in medicine and taking care of patients. I was still shadowed some doctors and saw what they did and read some books about medicine I was still really interested in. Then I went to medical school. And I came in like an orthopedics just because I always liked sports and was pretty active. Then in the beginning or middle of my third year, I kind of thought about neurosurgery for the first time and had never really thought about it once because it doesn't get the best reputation amongst some of the masses of students, and even some of our higher up medical school teachers and educators didn't get the best reputation. But I was actually on my neurology rotation, and I really liked the patient population. It was really intense. I mean, the depth and gravity of these patient interactions were really unique. We were rounding on patients at some of the worst times in their lives: stroke, brain tumors, brain hemorrhages. And I found it to be a real privilege to meet people at these really challenging times and walk them through that. And not only can you help them with the medicine that you know and the skill set that you have, but you can be there for them as a person and as a human. And I like neurology, but the rounding was just really long for me. And I knew that I always liked surgery. So then I read several books about neurosurgery. One was When the Air Hits Your Brain by
Mm-hmm.
Frank Vertasek. The other one was A Day in the Frontal Lobe by Katrina Furlick. And those books were really eye-opening for me. They were just talking about their residency and their training. And then I was kind of had a major course correction. I was thinking about neurosurgery, so just got as much advice as I could about the field and going into it. And then throughout residency, I mean, residency was great. Obviously hard and challenging, long hours, but I came away with some of my closest friends. And those intense training periods really breed camaraderie and breed closeness amongst your peers. So I tell our students one of the most important things to look for in a training program is residents that get along, that will do anything for the guy or girl next to them and work together as a team, because that is such a formative experience. And again, some of my best friends and closest relationships, people in my wedding, I came away from residency. And then about halfway through residency, I decided on spine surgery, just because I realized I came home happiest after those days that I was doing spine surgery. That was mostly some of my friends and my girlfriend at the time, my wife, told me, said, yeah, you're really happiest when you're doing spine cases, because it can be hard to think about it yourself. You kind of get in your head so much. It's hard to make those decisions in an unbiased way. But I really liked all the different approaches. When you finish neurosurgery residency, mostly everyone can do spine, but really to do the complex spine surgeries, scoliosis, deformity correction, tumors, I was really intrigued by that, because I think that's a very unique skill set. And then I had worked with some orthopedic surgeons in residency. Clint Devon was a major mentor of mine. Sadly, he passed away, but he was an unbelievable, larger-than-life guy who taught me a lot of spine surgery, as did many of my other neurosurgery mentors in residency. But I did a fellowship in spine deformity surgery with mostly orthopedic surgeons, Dr. Larry Lenke and Dan Rue, Ron Lehman, and that really was phenomenal. Doing an extra year in these complex techniques and working with orthopedic surgeons just really improved and broadened my perspective in spine surgery, because obviously both fields come at the topic of spine surgery from a slightly different vantage point. And if you can incorporate all principles, you're that much better and that much more able to treat patients. Prior to that, actually, I lived in Africa for 6 months in Tanzania and did spine surgery there. That was made possible through my residency, where I took a 2-week trip when I was a chief resident. I went with our chairman, Reed Thompson, and Chris Bonfield was a major mentor for me there. So that was a phenomenal experience doing spine surgery there. And then have, for the last 2+ years, been back at Vanderbilt on faculty.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for elaborating so much.
No problem. I can't forget about sports concussion. That's been a major passion of mine as well. I started that as a student as well, and now I help lead our Sports Concussion Center. And sports brain injuries, short-term, long-term effects, such a common hot topic nowadays. So it's a real privilege to be able to treat those athletes as well.
And that interest developed during your residency?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I told you I like sports, and I needed a way to get my sports fix in neurosurgery.
Yeah.
It's easy to do in orthopedics, but so I met, we had a sports neuropsychologist here at the time. His name was Gary Solomon. It was like a father figure to me. He really taught me how to do research and taught me about the field of sports concussion. And with the help of a lot of students and a lot of co-residents, we've been able to do a lot of work in that area. Aaron Yengo Khan, who was just a graduate of our program last year, is probably another phenomenal concussion researcher. We work together a lot. And again, no research happens alone, right? Everyone works in teams, and you need a village. Research, to steal the words of Dr. Solomon, research is a labor of love. It takes a lot of time and effort and teamwork to put out good research. But with the help of a lot of people, we've been able to do that.
What led you to go to Harvard for your degree in epidemiology and biostats?
Yeah, great question. So I had done some research in residency, but I realized I was kind of hitting a ceiling. Like, I knew some stats, statistical analysis, and epidemiology, but I didn't know that much. So I was having to rely on other people to do the stats for our projects, and I didn't like waiting, didn't like being dependent on other people. So I wanted to get an MPH in my middle of my residency, in addition to operating to keep doing clinical work. And at Harvard, I think for the first time, it offered a remote MPH. Okay. So I didn't want to be sitting in class for 6 hours a day. That would be challenging. And I didn't want to be out of the operating room that much. So I found an online or distance learning platform. And Harvard was a really good program. Came away, learned a lot about epidemiology and how to do my own stats after that.
Yeah. I'm doing some research currently, and I can definitely see the fact that eventually I'll probably hit a ceiling, just because without the dedicated training, it just seems like it'd be very difficult to really dig in to the level of depth necessary be a to be fully autonomous.
Yeah, exactly. You can get a lot of it on YouTube. Honestly, there's a lot of great
Yeah.
stats videos, but I mean, some of our students now we work with who are brilliant can just teach themselves stats
Yeah.
on YouTube. But I like the more classroom, formal setting, so I could learn kind of the theory behind it, so I could really learn it. But
Yes.
you can get a lot of different ways. To be
Yes. The
honest.
thing I found is some of the assumptions behind something like a multiple linear regression. That's something that you don't um, get taught unless you are on the right site that really goes into detail. And then
Mhm.
sometimes you can find yourself doing statistical tests which are not appropriate, like
Yeah,
not testing whether it's parametric or non-parametric. You could run a t-test when you should not. And then,
yeah,
you report it back to your PI and they're like, this is terrible. This is terrible.
yeah.
This is the wrong test.
There are a
So
lot of caveats. There are so many caveats. And also, if you ask a question to 10 statisticians, you may get 10 different answers. There are so many
exactly. Yeah.
different ways to run things. But to your point, you have to be responsible with the data and do the right thing. Even though there are a lot of different ways to do it, there's definitely ways to do it incorrectly.
Oh yes, for sure, for sure. Come on, follow up with the next question. What led you to choose to attend Vanderbilt for medical school? And did you know that you wanted to be a neurosurgeon when you began your medical education? Obviously, you already mentioned that. So what led you to choose Vanderbilt for medical school?
Yeah, I had from New York originally, went to college in upstate New York at Cornell, and a lot of my friends joined a fraternity. A lot of my friends were from all over the country. There are a lot of New York people there because it's partly a state school, but my best friends were from Oregon, Texas, California, Puerto Rico, Ohio, etc. And I really was jealous of them that they kind of left their home area and went somewhere
Mhm.
new. I thought that would be really gaining and really growth promoting. So I just did that for medical school. I applied all over. I got into like 2 or 3 schools after applying to like 40 or 50. It's challenging to get in. And Vanderbilt was probably the best school by far, and also it was in a different region. It was in the southeast, where I
Yeah,
lived most northeast. So uh, both of being a good school, and I took I took a trip down there, and it seemed like a really good culture, really good people, where the students worked hard, but also kind of what I spoke to earlier about residency. They had good friendships and good camaraderie relationships. So it was a really easy decision for me.
yeah. Nashville's a great place.
Yeah, Nashville too it's like a totally different city from when I moved here in 2008.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
Nashville,
oh yeah,
really fun place to be.
yeah, for sure. So who in the neurosurgery department mentored you during your third year and fourth year as you were going in and trying to decide whether you wanted to pursue neurosurgery residency and where you wanted to pursue it, and that whole process of submitting your application, etc.
Yeah, so I told you I kind of settled in nursery late, kind of middle of my third year. Most of the research I had done was orthopedics up until that point. So I met several key people to um, at that time. The first was probably who's my chairman right now, my partner now, Dr. Reed Thompson. I was a no-name third year medical student, and I just emailed the chairman randomly saying, "Hey, I'm a medical student interested in neurosurgery." And within like an hour, he responded and said, "Yes, Scott would be happy to meet." So that was kind of
Yeah,
blew me away to start. And then I met with Dr. Thompson, and then he put me in touch with several other faculty. Another guy, again, who's still a very close friend and partner, Dr. Alan Sills, who
hmm,
helped start our Sports Concussion Center. He's now the chief medical officer of the NFL. He is such a dynamic guy. He was a phenomenal surgeon, a phenomenal teacher. He was great with patients. So both of them really were very early mentors to me that showed me that you could be a neurosurgeon and have a family and maintain great relationships, interactions with people. And I was also put in touch with a young spine faculty at the time. His name was Dr. Matt McGirt, who was just a research machine. And his energy and his ability to just get things done quickly was infectious, and is still to me the gold standard in a lot of ways. So those were kind of some of my early mentors who were not just good at what they did as surgeons, but good people
hmm.
and successful family men, husbands and fathers, and people I really respect too, and still respect.
Based on your answer, I have a follow-up question. So was the rumors about not being able to have a family life in neurosurgery, was that something that was kind of holding you back from fully deciding to go into the field at that point in your life?
Well, you hear these things, right? When you're a medical student, you hear these rumors or the stereotypes about specialties, and you're just a student and you're very impressionable. So you really don't know if they're true or not.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't actively seek them out in the field or read books or listen to interviews and things like that, then you may just think it's true and you may just write it off. So that's what I almost did.
Mm-hmm.
But after talking to people in the field, and honestly, any surgical subspecialty is going to be pretty busy. But you hear that, yeah, training is very hard, right? The 7 year neurosurgery residency, I tell people, your time is not right. You're kind of beholden to the service. Yes, you have days and weeks off, and those are really important for balance and time with friends and loved ones. But once you're done with your training, you can make your hours. You know, just to quote our chairman, Reed Thompson, because I know pediatricians that don't see their kids, right? You can do anything once you're done. And I have friends in private practice that work 4 days, 3.5 days a week, and they play golf on 1 day a week. So you can totally make your own hours by the time you're done. But the training is very challenging, and the training, you have a lot less control over your schedule.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Can you describe for the audience the difference between enfolded rotation and fellowship training?
Yeah, so neurosurgery residency is long, 7 years. And most programs these days, during the 4th and 5th years, or some people do the 4th, and then your chief year, you can have elective time. So if whatever your area of interest is, skull-based, vascular, spine, you can basically choose specific rotations to do to kind of subspecialize or focus on your area of interest.
Gotcha.
And
so what led you I'm sorry.
I was going to say the enfolded ones are during your residency, which I did some of those. And then the postgraduate fellowship, which I also did in spine surgery, those are after residency. And I think there's benefits to both for sure.
What do you see as the main benefit and the main drawback from doing it within your residency versus after residency?
Well, I think there are pros to both. So the 2 years of elective time that we had were very, I didn't want to be out of the operating room for that long. You spend 3 years working really hard, learning the tenets and the principles of basic neurosurgery. And I wanted to follow it up and stay busy in the operating room. 2 years just for me was too long to be out.
Yeah.
Because when you come back as a PGY6, there's going to be kind of a new curve that you've been out. So I wanted to stay busy and stay in the operating room. Certainly I want to do other things like MPH and research, but definitely want to stay busy. But I would also highlight the value of a postgraduate fellowship. 7 years is really long. So people think, oh, I know everything there is to know about spine surgery or brain tumor surgery, skull-based. But there's a major difference to doing a fellowship or learning from people at the end of your residency, because you have 7 years to build on. So when I went to fellowship at Columbia and learned some of these complex techniques and scoliosis and deformity, I could build on the 7 years that I had learned before, whereas the other things I had learned enfolded, I just didn't have as much experience. So all the neurosurgeons and orthopedic surgeons who have done my fellowship, at Columbia, have all just spoken so highly of it and gone on to do some impressive things. And yes, it's another year. It's an 8th year. You do sacrifice some monetary gains. You sacrifice some time to be an attending, but I would say it's totally worth it. You don't have to do it, right? There are a lot of ways to be good at what you do, but I think that extra year to build on your 7 years is really valuable.
Yes. I was talking to Dr. Minger about this last week, and he said something very similar, especially about his time at Columbia. So what led you to pursue enfolded rotations in spinal oncology and peripheral nerve surgery specifically?
Yeah, so spinal oncology, I just really enjoyed it. It's a really unique patient population. Patients with metastatic spine cancer are living a lot longer these days with all the advances in immunotherapy, chemotherapy, and radiation. And then primary spine tumors I hadn't done much of, but were really interested in. So learning at MD Anderson and from Larry Rines and Claudio Tatsui, real leaders in the area, I saw some surgeries that I hadn't really had the chance to otherwise see. And these are some surgeries that are rarely done at other centers, but a lot of people go to MD Anderson for these major sacral chordoma resections and spinal pelvic reconstructions. So chance to learn from one of the world's experts was foundational for me. And the peripheral nerve surgery, also I had a real interest in it. I like the anatomy and also just got a unique perspective into that.
And you did that at Mayo, right? Gotcha. So after doing those enfolded rotations, what was your thought process as far as what you wanted your future practice to look like, and how did you determine that complex spine surgery is a specific area that you wanted to to make the majority of, I'm assuming the majority of your cases are that these days versus peripheral nerve or spinal oncology. So what was that decision making process like for you?
Yeah, well, I definitely do a lot of spine tumors too. So spinal oncology is a big part of it. I do some
I
peripheral
see.
nerve, not as much, just for whatever reason. That's how things worked out. But you just kind of go with where your interests lie and where you find the most gratification and passion of being in the operating room. So a lot of I do all spine surgery now, right? We do a lot of spine trauma, things that come to the emergency room, or basic smaller degenerative spine surgery. I treat a lot of athletes with spine injuries. Um, a lot of those end up being non-operative because you try to avoid surgery in high-level athletes, but some need surgery. So we've operated on a handful of them, and those are the opposite. You try and be as minimally invasive as possible
Mm-hmm.
because you want to get athletes back to play as quickly as possible. But you kind of just go wherever your interests take you, Garrett. And one thing I really enjoy now is the planning for some of these bigger spinal deformity surgery or scoliosis reconstructions. There's so much to consider in spinal alignment and where to do your osteotomies and what kind of interbodies and what approach and what you want your final alignment to be. It's a lot of planning that takes
Yeah.
place for these surgeries. What size screw you want to put in every level, the order of every case, what type of rods to use, your sagittal alignment, your coronal alignment. There's so much to think about, and it's a real challenge. So a lot of these patients too that we end up operating on, I've been treating them for a year and a half to optimize them so they can lose weight, get their diabetes under
Yeah.
control,
Mm-hmm.
get on anabolic osteoporosis medication. So I like the challenge of that, both the planning and the execution, and then following the patients before and after surgery for a long time. Because when you do some of those really big surgeries to people, you know them for life. And you get
Oh,
to
yes.
know
Yes.
patient, their spouse, their family, and I find that really rewarding when things go well.
Yes. I find it very interesting sitting with Dr. Minger while he's planning a case because he's completely reconstructing these people's spines oftentimes. And it's amazing the amount of detail that goes into it, especially like you were saying, how much time is taken before the surgery to maximize how safe the surgery is going to be just based on maximizing the patient's health. All those things are extremely interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what led you to choose to do your fellowship at Columbia specifically? And at what point in were you PGY7 you decided to do that? I mean, what time did you apply and why was it there and things of that nature?
Yeah, so again, major mentor Clint Devon had really espoused the benefit of orthopedic spine fellowship, and same thing. I saw a lot of value in that cross pollination between both specialties. And Dr. Lenke is I went to so many conferences as a resident, and everyone just talks about him like he's in a rarefied air, and it's true because he's extremely talented. There are a lot of very talented deformity scoliosis surgeons around, so there are a lot of ways to get phenomenal training. But I was just drawn to his results and work ethic, and I thought it would be enormous opportunity to train with him and a lot of other people at Columbia too. Dan Rue in cervical spine surgery and Ron Lehman as well. Learned an enormous amount from a lot of the neurosurgeons at Columbia too. So that was my goal, really given to me by Dr. Devon, Clint Devon, and then luckily I was able to apply and get in. But that was probably towards my 5th and 6th year in residency.
Gotcha. Awesome. Okay, so it has been stated that 80% or more of community neurosurgery practice is related to the spine. Since this is the case, what are the advantages to completing a fellowship in complex spine surgery instead of beginning a practice where most of the case volume is likely to be spine related?
I think just an extra year of training and any kind of repetitions in the case and learning from as many people as possible are going to make you more equipped to handle spine cases that come in. And when you start, just like when I've started, it takes time to build up, and you do all kinds of cases, 1 or 2 level ACDF, lumbar laminectomies, and there's no such thing as a small case in spine surgery. So every case has potential for major complication, even the simpler small cases. ACDF, there are a lot of ways to get into trouble, as there is the basic lumbar decompression. So I think taking every case really seriously and trying to feel the weight of that in training. I tell my residents now, if you can feel as much responsibility as I have as the attending, then you're going to be the best off and most suited for your transition being attending. There's no way to truly replace that when you're a trainee. You can only know once you're done, I think. But if you can try as much as possible to feel the weight of the responsibility, I think the better off you'll be.
Is that like thinking through every single step in the process, and even if it's the attending making the decision, going through that same thought process preemptively? Is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
exactly. Some of the best residents I've worked with really treat the case with the same level of care and expertise and respect as I do as the attending. If you can do that, then that really impresses me as a trainee, and I feel like I really have a partner doing the case together.
Yes, 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 yes.
Because, but again, no matter how much you try as a trainee, you can't recreate that. It's
Yes, yes.
the true feel of it. But to the extent that you could try, I think you're way better off.
Okay, very interesting. Okay. Okay, so in your experience, what is the factor most responsible for determining which subspecialty training a resident chooses to pursue? Is it usually early mentors, disposition within one's personality, early research success in a particular area, or convenience due to a variety of factors such as early research experience and success in a certain area? Or is it just
But
a variety of factors?
there are a lot of roads, there are a lot of roads to whatever you're going to be passionate about. I think, I had another mentor early in residency. He's a vascular surgeon. Um, his name was Giamacco, and this guy was larger than life too. I idolized him. He was really successful, really dynamic, had a million things going on. He moved on to another institution, but I often wonder if he stayed, might have maybe I would have gone into vascular. So I think out of all the things you mentioned, I would probably say the impact of a mentor, because if you have someone who really invests in you,
Hmm.
and you can try and model yourself after him or her at work, in the operating room, in clinic, with family, outside of the hospital, that's a really powerful thing. And I think we're all probably have a lot of different interests. I don't think I was destined to only do spine surgery. I
Hmm.
could have probably done several things. That's how it worked out for me, and that's what I like the most. So I'd probably say the power of early mentorship is probably the most important.
Gotcha. Yeah, I actually know Dr. Michael Feldman because I was at UAB for a year and he was a fellow there. And I
Yeah.
was asking him a similar question one day, and that's what he said. He said early mentorship for him was extremely important in helping him, decide he wanted to do endovascular training and do the pediatric training. Yes. So that's the end of my questions. But I have to ask, since you have such an interest in sports, did you play sports at Cornell?
No, not Cornell. I just played in high school. Played
Gotcha.
basketball and baseball in high school. Played a lot of intramurals, but no, not at the college level.
Gotcha. Are
I'd
you a
like to
Titans
think.
fan now? Or are you still a Giants or Jets fan?
I like them all. I like the Jets and the Giants. But living down here and helping to cover some of the games for concussions, you grow fond of the team, of the
Oh
state that
yeah,
you're in. So yeah, I like the Titans too.
of course, of course.